I tried beating Terraria as the Valhalla Knight. This mod introduces a ton of new weapons, armor sets, and even bosses into the game in the theme of the mythological realm of Valhalla. Will I be able to defeat the Moonlord using the ancient melee weapons of this realm, or will I die trying? Well, let's find out. I started off by spawning into the world and chopping down every single tree in sight. I then realized that we could actually craft our very first weapons out of glass, so I went over to the desert and mined up as much sand as I could. We actually needed a glass kiln, which was made out of iron or lead, so we needed to go mining in order to get enough resources to even craft the workbench that is going to be responsible for making these weapons. I went over to the underground desert, found myself some iron and dug around, getting myself some life crystals, getting myself even more iron, and then upon coming back to spawn, I placed down a workbench and started work on a very long elevator. While digging down, I actually managed to fall into an ice biome, and this is where I discovered Valhallite ore. This gave us the ability to actually craft Valhallite bars, and out of that, craft various different weapons that we can use in the future. Once I was at spawn, I crafted myself the glass kiln and I placed it down, made myself a ton of glass bars, crafted myself a glass pickaxe, a glass sword, and a glass hamaxe. Every single time we used these weapons, it actually lowered our defense, so we were gonna need a upgrade very quickly. This is where the Valhallite ore came in, and since I was already in the snow biome, I decided to scour this entire region and try to look for more. While exploring the ice caverns, I stumbled upon many heart crystals and a ton of Valhallite ore. Upon coming back to spawn, I actually crafted myself a prison builder so we could build a bunch of NPC prisons, I mean houses of course, because we needed a brand new NPC from the Valhalla mod to move in before we could craft anything using this ore. Once I placed down all of the NPC houses, I went down over to the corruption and started blowing up the various different orbs to get myself the meteorite to spawn in. I then later explored a granite biome, and right under that was another ice cave, so I went over there, picked up more Valhallite ore, and upon coming back to spawn, I chopped down a couple of trees and then went down to the caverns in order to explore. I continued digging out my elevator because eventually we were going to need to get down to the underworld, and as I was digging my elevator, I actually discovered a brand new tar biome. After this, I actually ventured over to a white granite biome. I saw a Trojan horse, and upon opening it, there was a bunch of hoplites waiting for me and trying to troll me. I of course massacred all of them and then went down to the underworld and picked up myself a hellforge. Upon coming back to spawn, I went back down to the frozen caverns and tried to dig out even more Valhallite ore. Once I came back to spawn, I noticed that a brand new NPC had moved in. This was the dwarf. I went straight over to him and bought one of his special anvils called the Dwarven Anvil. This let us actually craft things out of the Valhallite ore that we picked up so we could finally start upgrading our gear. I gathered myself all the Valhallite ore that I had, crafted myself a Valhallite pickaxe, and then continued digging out my elevator. During this time, I managed to get myself a Valhallite sword, and my next goal was to craft full Valhallite armor. Throughout this time, I scoured the entire ice biome to get myself as much Valhallite as I could. I had spelunker potions, mining potions, and I got myself a bunch of this ore. Once I came back to the surface, we got invaded by goblins, so using my Valhallite sword, I took out all of the goblins, and after this goblin invasion was done, I crafted myself the Valhallite spear. Using the spear, I went over to the corruption, challenged and then defeated the Eater of Worlds, and then upon coming back to spawn, using the Demonite bars, I crafted myself the Light's Nightmare, Corruption Servant, and a Demon Altar, so we could use it for crafting. I later went to go pick up some obsidian, and then I went down over to the underworld to pick up myself some hellstone. Once I came back to spawn, I crafted myself the Sparking Short Sword, which was essentially the Fiery Greatsword in a short sword, and then after this, I went over to the jungle and tried to get myself as many life crystals, stingers, and jungle spores as I could, so we could craft the Blade of Grass version of the short swords. And after I came all the way back to spawn, I summoned in the Eye of Cthulhu and fought it using the Valhallite spear and the Sparking Short Sword. sword. This boss fight was quite easy, and we checked it off the boss checklist rather quickly, and then after this I went back down to the jungle, got myself more resources such as jungle spores, stingers, vines, and then upon finding a queen bee hive, I got cocky and thought I would definitely be able to defeat the queen bee. So I summoned her in and took probably the fattest L of all time. This is where I realized that our weapons are genuinely not powerful enough, and we either have to get better armor or better weapons if we even want to get close to challenging the wall of flesh. After coming back to spawn, I crafted myself and combined all of the various short swords together to craft myself the Knight's Edge version of the short swords. I then made myself this Knight's Edge projectile, and then I went straight down to the underworld to build myself an arena for the wall of flesh and take out the fleshy boss itself. We got ourselves a guide voodoo doll rather quickly, so I went to go buy a bunch of buffs, and upon coming down to the underworld, I chucked the guide voodoo doll into the lava, summoned in the wall of flesh, and using these two different weapons, we absolutely demolished this boss, putting us into hard mode. As soon as we got into hard mode, I went down over and blessed the world with all of the various different hard mode ores. I then went back over to the jungle, defeated the queen bee just because I had to get my revenge, and in order to get our very next upgrades, we actually had to get corrode ore. This required us smashing corrosive acid on stone to get ourselves this ore, and once we got enough corrode ore, I came all the way back to spawn and turned it all into corrode bars. Using a titanium furnace, we crafted ourselves a corrode sword, a corrode spear, and full corrode armor. After this was done, using a frost brand and combining it with an ice shard from an ice golem, we crafted ourselves a brand new sword called the blue slice. This was essentially an upgrade to the ice blade and shot projectiles just like the pre-hard mode version of the ice blade. We later went to go take out wyverns to get ourselves souls of flight, and I also massacred a bunch of harpies up until we got a giant harpy feather, and when I came back to spawn, I crafted myself a pair of harpy wings, and then later using 5 cobalt, 5 souls of flight, and 1 star, I crafted myself Heaven's Seal, which was a summon for one of the brand new bosses of the Valhalla mod. So I crafted this, and as soon as it turned to nighttime, I built myself an arena and summoned in Yernero the Emperor. This was this very weird UFO boss with hands that I did not understand whatsoever. We had to take out all of the various different rotating balls around him. Yes, indeed, I did say balls. And once we took all of those out, we could actually fight the boss itself. Upon defeating this boss, he actually dropped us some Imperial cloth and jade shards, which we can use to craft brand new weapons and armor. I crafted myself a jade sword and a pair of jade greaves. We still needed to defeat the boss a couple more times to get ourselves everything that we wanted, so I crafted more boss summons, waited for it to turn to nighttime, and challenged the boss once more. Before challenging the boss, I actually went over to the hallowed biome, got myself some souls of light, I farmed out some souls of night in the underground corruption, and as I came back to spawn, I crafted myself the summons for all the various different mechanical bosses. Before fighting the boss, I combined myself an ice shard with some adamantite to craft myself the frost daggers. This was essentially an underpowered version of the vampire knives, and it did not heal you, but it did deal some pretty decent range damage, and it was a melee weapon, so I used it to take out Yernero the Emperor once again, and a third final time, in order to craft ourselves full jade armor and a jade spear. Using these brand new weapons such as the jade spear, we took out the destroyer, and then waited for it to turn to nighttime once more in order to fight the twins. Using the frost dagger, we took out both of the twins, and then left Skeletron Prime for last. We took out this mechanical skeleton Boio, making the jungle grow restless. Do you know what else grows restless? That is right, the weeds in your backyard, just like Plantera when you don't subscribe to the Boio YouTube channel. So I recommend you press the subscribe button, or you might have a Plantera bulb appear in your backyard. Anyways, using all the various different souls, I combined one of the Knight's Edge throwing weapons into a true moon cycle, and then using the pickaxe axe, I went over to pick up a bunch of chlorophyll chlorophyte within the jungle. Using chlorophyte, I crafted myself a chlorophyte glaive, which was another one of these spinning discs, and then I also crafted the true Gungnir. After this, I combined a bunch of light discs with some of the souls to craft myself true light discs, and then I summoned in the solar eclipse to get myself some broken hero swords and a broken hero spear. After this, I went over to the jungle, built myself an arena for Planetara's bulb, and summoned her in. We actually managed to take her out on our very first try, which was extremely surprising because I genuinely thought we were gonna die. And then after this, I went into Golem's temple, picked up some solar tablets, picked up some of the summons for him, and then came back to spawn. I went over to fight the solar eclipse once more to get myself more broken hero spears and broken hero swords, and upon getting all the resources that I needed, I combined the true light disc and that one knight's edge throwable to make the Terra glaive. This was probably one of the best weapons in our arsenal. It could go through walls, it was extremely fast, it dealt nearly 100 damage, and we could shoot multiple projectiles at once. This still counted as a melee weapon, so I'm still sticking true to my class. And then after this, I went straight over to Golem's temple and absolutely demolished him using the Terra glaive countless times in order to get myself some beetle husks. And then upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself a full set of beetle armor, some beetle wings, and then went straight over to defeat the lunatic cultist using the Terra glaive and the Terra trident, which we crafted by combining all the various tridents in our inventory. We took out the lunatic cultist quite quickly, prompting the celestial pillar event to start. Using the Terra trident, I first went over to challenge the solar pillar. We took that out quite quickly, and using the solar fragments, we were able to craft two different weapons from the solar pillar. It was either a yo-yo called the Helios or a sword called the flaming blade. I decided to craft the flaming blade, and apparently I made the wrong decision, as this was a very close ranged weapon that swung very fast, but you would take a lot of damage in the process while trying to damage other mobs as well. I tried to go take out the vortex pillar next, but I got absolutely demolished. So I crafted myself the Helios after this, and then went to take out the vortex pillar next. After taking out the vortex pillar, I went to take out the nebula pillar, and once that was defeated, I took care of the pirate invasion that interrupted my celestial journeys. I bought myself a bunch of buff potions, built myself an arena for Moonlord using ice blocks, and then went to go take out the very last pillar, which was the Stardust pillar. Upon breaking that using the Helios, I came all the way back to spawn, and in no time whatsoever, Mr. Squid God spawned in. I spammed all three of his eyeballs using the Helios, and upon taking out all three of the eyeballs, his core opened up, and I tried to take it out with the flaming blade. We managed to take it out with the Helios in the very end, and we took out the Moonlord, finishing the Valhalla mod. There are so many different classes and so many different weapons within this mod, so if you want to see different class playthrough, be sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Consider checking out another video like this on screen. This has been Boio. Peace out.